The Last of the 20 by Joseph N. Wdowski, MCS 124. He realized he had not heard anything from a shelter since before he entered the mall with Gilbert. They were aware of their condition, but the shock of losing Gilbert and trying to figure out his next step he had not reported in. Base Command. He used his helmet's communications to report in as he walked east. Base Command, he repeated a bit louder, yet did not receive any reply. Computer, connect with Base Command. There is no signal from Base Command. The female voice responded. His communications icon on his visor showed a direct link to the above satellite array. He stopped as if trying to look up at the computer voice. Confirm. There is no signal from Base Command. The computer repeated. He looked over his shoulder to look back down the road he had been traveling, as if he could see the Base Command from where he was now. His visor instead picked up that the Zacharys were just at the edge of sensor range and were slowly coming up from behind him. They want a second go at me. The Zacharys, though, stopped seeming to realize he had stopped. They were purposely keeping their distance from him. He noted to the computer that they were not merely mindless animals and were showing some level of reasoning skills. Again, he tried to reach his command center. Still there was no reply. Computer, what is the status of Shelter 1? I have no information on the status of Shelter 1. The data link to the digital library is the only connection. The computer impassionedly reported. He wondered if his team members that had turned over had helped the prune faces infiltrate and wipe out the shelter. Computer, had there been any distress signals from Shelter 1? None. He looked back up the road he was taking to New Haven. Computer, establish communications with Shelter 3. Not able to establish any connection with Shelter 3. The monotone female voice replied. Why? Unknown. This is not good. He turned his attention back to the road ahead of him, restarting his long walk, a long walk to a sanctuary that may not exist anymore. His visor warned him that the Zacharys behind him were once again on the move, yet keeping their distance. What are they planning? He wondered. A half hour later, he was still making his way east on what remained of the Boston Post Road. He kept a wary eye on the Zacharys, which were oddly from their distance, kept a perfect pace with him. They have incredible eyesight or keen senses of smell. Or could they hear me as I walked and stopped? Computer, a biological comparative scan of the Zachary senses. A computer scan of one of the animals popped up on his visor with analytics. The graphic zoomed into the animal's eyes. From the primary scan of the Zachary, they have subhuman eyesight and are colorblind. Their night vision is nearly non-existent. The image zoomed to a cutaway illustration of the long nasal cavity of the animals. It has a massive number of nasal receptors indicating a sense of smell greater than a dog's. The image zoomed to the ears and brain of the Zachary. The sound receptors and the part of their brain for processing sound are almost to the level of a bat's. Enough. On his right, a harbor appeared. His map on his visor identified his location as the town of Mamaroneck, and to his right was Harbor Island Park. Ahead of him was the intersection with Mamaroneck Avenue, which if he took north, would bring him to the city of White Plains. Military barricades were erected ahead of him at the intersection. As he got closer, it was clear there had been a firefight at the location. As he scanned the ground around the makeshift fortification, bones of the long dead were buried under a few inches of soil, and plant life had grown over them over the years. His sensors were picking up the bones of hundreds of human bodies. His scans made it clear that they had been taken out by conventional projectile weapons and explosive fragmentation devices. He stopped, realizing he could be walking into a minefield. Computer, any live ordnances? The area is clear of any live ordnances. Computer, how long ago was this? This. The computer questioned. How long have these remains been here? He rephrased his question. By the condition of the bones, layer of sediment topsoil and vegetation, estimate 25 to 30 years ago. That would have been just a couple of years after the virus hit. He said to himself. Correct. The female computer voice confirmed. Enough, he responded, not meaning to address the computer with his comment. He approached the HESCO bastions, a wireframe heavy fabric lining that was quickly filled with soil to withstand bullets and explosives. The barriers were erected in a square that had attempted to defend the intersection from attack from any direction. At the height of a man, he could not see what they had been erected to protect. Making his way around the west wall to the south end that faced the road that led into the Harbor Island Park, beach, and marinas, he found a small maze of the barriers that defended the south entrance. Entering the defensive square, he noticed that there was also a north entrance that had the same outer maze of defensive HESCO bastions. Along the solid walls, firing steps had been built to defend the outpost. Even more remains were found in the walls. It seems they didn't win in the long run. In the center of the square stood what he realized was an old mid-21st century robot. He approached the machine that seemed to be powerless. "Well, what are you?" he questioned the robot. The machine powered up and stood erect, turning its two-camera head towards Miller. "I am Mobile Command Station 124. The machine replied. "Please state your name and rank." "Team Commander Miller." He automatically replied. "Are you our relief column?" The machine questioned. "I was beginning to think you would not arrive. What happened here?" "National Guard unit was stationed here to buy time for non-infected VIPs to make safe passage to Shelter 1 in Manhattan. My commander ordered me to power down when our position was overrun." The robot looked down at the skeleton in a uniform with brass captain's bars on the epaulates. "It seems more time has passed than I was aware of. This battle happened decades ago." Miller explained to the machine. "How are you powered?" "Midget portable thorium reactor. My main function as a mobile command station is communications, advanced sensors, and power supply." The machine looked back at Miller. "You can charge my equipment." Miller hoped the machine could. "Of course."